Hey, David Brewster here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Motley Crue. And of course, we're going to be talking about Mick Mars. And Mick Mars is definitely a underrated and kind of often forgotten, guitar legend. And I've always liked his guitar style. Even when I was a young kid, and my sister was really into Motley Crue, and I could hear those riffs and those solos, and I thought, all right, I think I like Motley Crue too. And then I started listening to him. And he's really just a good kind of balls to the wall, solid, hard rock and metal guitarist. And I'm sure I'm going to have some viewers that are going to argue with me. And they're going to be like, hey, wait, Motley Crue's not metal. But they had pentagrams, they had leather, they had the image, they'd have fire and blood and all this different stuff. Mick Mars played Warlocks and Les Pauls, so the image was very much metal. Even if, some of their later music may have been a little poppier and they kind of, softened a little bit as they became more popular. But there's no question, Too Fast for Love, Shout at the Devil, and Theater of Pain, those three albums are hard-hitting, they're aggressive, they're dark, especially Shout at the Devil. Shout at the Devil's basically, that is a metal album in my opinion, even though it's not, it's not Slayer or something, but it's dark, it's heavy. There's a few kind of segue tracks like the introduction, like In the Beginning. When I was a kid and I heard that song, it scared the crap out of me. It's all detuned and In the Beginning and God and Devil and all this stuff. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to hell just from listening to this. And I remember I'd turn it down in my bedroom so my dad couldn't hear it. So this Chordplay episode is definitely going to be a tribute to Mick Mars, who I feel is an underappreciated and kind of, often forgotten guitar legend. He's a great guitarist, solid like a rock. In a lot of ways, Mick Mars is kind of the secret weapon of Motley Crue. No offense to, Tommy and Vince and Nicky, but Mick Mars was the one that was putting the gasoline in their hard rock machine or their engine or whatever, because his riffs and his solos, were crushing. But most of the things he played, in the history of the band, most of his riffs and rhythm parts were, based around really simple things, power chords and, dyads and double stops and stuff. So he wasn't doing, anything crazy, like Buckethead or Yngwie or something, but he had this aggression, this kind of energy and a fire, when he would pick up his guitar. And I noticed that right away where I thought, man, it's just hard hitting. There's a lot of, like I said, power and energy, when he plays. And this lesson's really just going to look at some famous, Motley Crue moments. And we're really just going to stay within the first three albums, Too Fast for Love, Shout at the Devil, and Theater of Pain. And there's nothing wrong with the other albums. The self-titled Motley Crue album is great. It's kind of underappreciated. Dr. Feelgood, I think, is actually Motley Crue's finest, album as far as production and the sound and the songs. Dr. Feelgood's great. And Girls Goes Girls is good too. But I'm going to stick with the classics. The opening, that was Too Young to Fall in Love, which is from Shout at the Devil, and I think that's honestly my favorite Motley Crue song. It's definitely my favorite Mick Mars riff. And I know the first time I ever heard that, I ignored everything else and I just heard that guitar and I thought, wow, that's awesome. And I love the fact it kind of moves and he's kind of, reinstating this theme or a melodic, device with those double stops. And then by the time the power chords show up, it's just hitting you in the head, which is really cool. So right there, we're basically playing, off the open A string. You can see right there, we're basically playing like a piece of, D over A. And then it's a little piece of A minor right there. And then a little piece of C over A. And then he's kind of like flirting with G and then going back to the C. So there's a little melodic thing happening right there. And you can kind of hear that melody in the middle of those, double stops and chords. Now when it moves, because that was all based in the key of A, and then you hear it go to G, and Nicky actually moves to G on the bass. But that would be a big stretch. I actually remember I worked on trying to keep that G root, when I was younger. And I wasn't sure how he was doing that, but Nicky's laying the bass line. And then Mick basically just kind of goes back to what he was doing in the key of A, even though technically the chord changed to G. And then it moves to F. And he does everything the same way again. And if you're curious about that, or if you want to argue with me, I felt the same way. I thought, I don't think he's doing that open A. I thought he was, somehow grabbing the G and somehow grabbing the F. And I've looked at transcriptions of the song. But then the defining moment when I decided, okay, that's exactly how he's playing it. I saw some live footage of Motley Crue, and it was a concert. I think it was from like 2004 or something, or might have been 2014. I can't remember what year it was from. But it was relatively recent. I mean, it was in the 2000s. But when they played this song, the camera pans right to Mick, and you see his hand, and he played exactly that. He just plays the single G, and then goes right back to that A riff, and then the single F, and right back to that A riff. And I was kind of surprised. I thought, okay, all these years later, I finally spotted him, playing it. And then the second part, he's really just bouncing off the low E string, and then he starts playing, an E power chord, D to F to E. And that's kind of flirting with Phrygian a little bit, which is, exotic, especially for an 80s, hard rock or metal band. And then he basically does that little single note to get back into A. And then you just repeat the first part again. And the second time through, he doubles, that power chord riff. But I've always loved that song, and that riff is just brutal. It's so cool. The next riff's from the Livewire, and this is definitely, really fast and brutal. And I think Too Fast for Love, it's just a step or two away from just a full-on punk album. It was just aggressive and fast, and definitely very different than the other Motley Crue. They kind of developed, into a different band almost, compared to that first album. And with the opening riff here, he's definitely doing kind of a James Hetfield thing, where he's, picking the open A string, and he's grabbing that, kind of C5, or that little piece of a double stop there on the 5th fret, and he hits that, but he keeps going back to that open A, and it's all downstrokes. There you can see we're kind of doing this almost the same thing. We're kind of using some of the same chords at least. The rhythm's different, of course, but he's really just grabbing that double stop there on the 5th fret, and then answers that with the 7th fret double stop. So we're still kind of flirting with a part of a C and part of a D, power chord over A. And then slowly, and the second time through, he does this little harmonic fill, which I think Eddie Van Halen, taught the world how to use harmonics as fills. Because it kind of reminds me of Eddie, but it's a little different. And it's just this. And it's just the 7th fret on the G, the 7th fret on the D twice as harmonics. And then go back to the 7th fret on the G again once. The 5th fret on the G twice as a harmonic. And then the 5th fret on the B as a harmonic. Now right there, go right back to the riff again. And then at the last time through, he does that really common kind of rock and roll, you know, fill. That's been in a bunch of songs. Alright, next up Looks the Kill, and definitely a big fan of this song too. And I know when I first tried to learn how to play this, I didn't know how Mick Mars tuned his guitar. I had no idea. I was just listening to it, you know, in my bedroom with my guitar and my stereo or whatever. And I thought, how is he doing that? And I ended up doing something crazy like that, where I was, you know, grabbing a lower root note. And then later I discovered, oh, Mick Mars tunes down a whole step. So, you know, back in the like early 80s, back in their Sunset Strip days, nobody was tuning down like that. You know, I mean, there were a few people, but it was very few and far between, you know, to hear somebody tuned, you know, a whole step lower on electric guitar. You know, Tony Iommi, you know, kind of pioneered that. But once you got away from the 70s and you started getting into the kind of the hard rock and glam and, you know, the rock and roll 80s, you know, half step down was common, standard tuning was common. You could hear a little bit of drop D here and there. But tuning down a whole step really wasn't normal, you know, and that really did give Motley Crue like this heavy kind of crunch and this, you know, edge that a lot of other bands at that time didn't have, simply because they were tuned lower. And it definitely reminds me of Cold Gin, like a variation of Kiss's Cold Gin, which Cold Gin would be just a little different, you know. But then during the chorus of the song, it really gets interesting. Starts on just a single, you know, E note there on the second fret on the D, and then he answers that with the open A string, and then he starts doing this little, you know, kind of mutation of chords. Right there you can see we're just grabbing that single E, like I said, and then the open A. And then right there, that's like a little piece of A minor, technically. That E and C note, you know, with the open A string signaling, you know, A minor. And then right there you can think of that as implying augmented or raised fifth. You know, you could think of that as an F note, but I'm thinking that as, you know, E sharp or augmented. And then you're going to hear that F or E sharp move up to an F sharp, which that will be an A minor 6. And then you're going to hear that F sharp go up to a G, and then that's a A minor 7 implying. And then he really just does this double stop on the G and the B string, and then back to that E note again. Classic song, and that riff is killer too. It's simple, but it kills. The next example is from Save Our Souls, which this is a very simple guitar riff, but I wanted to include this in this lesson because it's October, and this song also appears in one of my favorite horror movies. It's not my all-time favorite, but the Italian film Demons from the 80s. Demons actually has a cool soundtrack. Accept's on there, Motley Crue, I think there's like Rick Springfield, and Saxon I think's on there. But the riff is really simple. truth be told, I miss riffs like that. I miss hearing, you know, like whole note power chords being held, and, you know, half note power chords and ringing chords. And I also miss, you know, like eighth note rhythms. It seems like everybody today is so preoccupied with, you know, complexity and these crazy time signatures and, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, man, I kind of just miss those heavy, you know, AC/DC riffs and stuff where it just, you'd hear the chord kind of ring and it had this primal, you know, kind of energy. I miss that kind of stuff where it's like, you know, bring some of that back. But with that riff, it's really simple, just an A and then a single note line, and then go to a D power chord, and then another single note line. One thing about Mick Mars and his playing style, he definitely has this heavy kind of hard edge, but then he also has this kind of raw bluesy edge too. And you'll hear him playing slide, you'll hear these kind of almost blues, you know, kind of single note riffs and rhythm parts. And I always thought that was interesting too, where one minute he's playing this real heavy, you know, power chord riff, and then the next minute he's playing almost kind of a boogie like blues thing. And this is from the song City Boy Blues, the opening song from Theater of Pain. And he's doing something really interesting here with the chords, and it is kind of bluesy, even though it's technically a Crüe song. But it looks like this. For City Boy Blues, it's almost the reverse of what we saw in Looks That Kill, because Looks That Kill, you know, during the chorus, it had that. Right? And then City Boy Blues, we're going to be up here, we're basically starting in the key of E. It's like an E minor 7. And then that note, the D there on the D string, is going to move back to a C sharp. So now we're kind of doing like an E minor 6. And then that note's going to move back to a C, so now it's like a C5 over E. And then go down to an E power chord, and then there's a single note riff, like that. Once again, you know, I've mentioned this in other episodes of Chordplay and 3 for All and some other lessons I've made, but, you know, good music and great guitar parts, they don't have to be hard to play for them to be good. You know, some of the best music ever recorded and written and remembered is really simple. The last example here, you can see I switched to acoustic guitar, and this is God Bless the Children of the Beast, which is on Shout of the Devil, and it's one of those rare instrumental Motley Crue moments, which Motley Crue really did not put out very much, you know, instrumental material. This was an exception. I think they were still trying to figure out their style, you know, at that point. But this is really cool. It's actually, it was played on a 12 string, and we're in standard tuning now. So we're no longer tuned down a whole step. And this is another rare instance of Mick playing in standard tuning, which was not common. But it's really cool. It has this haunting, you know, sequence of chords, and it's pretty simple. It's not hard to play. It just sounds good, and that's kind of the epitome of Mick Mars. You know, a lot of his ideas were simple. You know, easy to play or easy to kind of see, but they just sound great. You know, it's like, man, those are great. You know, rhythms. Those are good leads. There's lots of great, you know, fills and all this stuff going on. But here we go. E minor 9 right there. a G6. And then this would basically be like an F major 7 sharp 11. And then just move that down a half step and you're playing E major. And it's pretty clever the way, you know, he moves down a sequence of chords. And then that last shape right before it begins again, that's technically part of E7. You know, it's just kind of played that way. So it's kind of hinting at E7, which that would imply, you know, harmonic minor. That's going to wrap this look at the chords of Motley Crue, and I almost can bet money you probably didn't think this was going to end on acoustic guitar. You probably thought I was going to have fire and pentagrams or something, or leather pants, and somebody was going to light them on fire. Sorry if I let you down, but in the future, I'm going to try to light my pants on fire and have, you know, pentagrams and stuff, but not today. You know, I'm still getting started here, so I don't have fiery pants and, you know, props and stuff. I do have some of these, you know, props, but not quite as cool as Motley Crue's props, because they had some killer stuff. And what Tommy had, the upside down drum kit, and yeah, they had all kinds of cool things going on. Every once in a while, especially back in the early days, you know, Mick would spit blood almost like Gene Simmons and stuff. So they had some really dark, you know, imagery. And then, you know, if you closed your eyes and waited a couple years, they just turned into a bunch of biker looking dudes, you know, where it's like, wait a minute, weren't you guys like full of pentagrams and leather and fire? And then all of a sudden you're just driving around on Harleys now. It's like, what happened? All right, so please leave some feedback and some comments and subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.